If you're listening to this while you're on winter break, or maybe you're resting, maybe you're recovering from being sick like I am right now, maybe you're suddenly full-time parenting again, I want to start by saying this out loud. This episode is not asking you to fix anything. It's not asking you to plan. It's not asking you to hustle your way into January. It's just here to help you breathe and maybe see the new semester a little more clearly. Because there's a quiet pressure that tends to show up around this time of year. This idea that January should mean new systems, new routines, new everything. And today I want to gently push back on that. Here's the reframe I want you to hold as we talk. January doesn't require a new system. It just needs a clear next step.
Welcome to the Secondary Teacher Podcast, the podcast for middle and high school teachers juggling multiple preps to get the strategies to reduce overwhelm so that you don't have to choose between being an effective teacher and prioritizing important relationships. I'm your host, Kristen Masick, a 10-year high school engineering teacher, former middle school assistant principal, and teacher coach. Every week, we will discuss strategies, systems, and time-saving tips to help you not only survive but thrive as a multiple prep teacher.
When I was first teaching, winter break honestly felt a lot like a mini summer break. I taught a mix of semester and year-long courses. Some of my classes would completely turn over in January. New students, new content, new everything. And even for the year-long courses, January felt like a reset point, a chance to do things better. And there were years, several of them, where I spent most of my winter break preparing the way I would prepare for a new school year. I revamped everything. I tossed out first semester materials, I created new workbooks, I rewrote systems, I rebuilt routines. And I want to be really honest here. At that stage of my life, it worked. I had the time, I had the energy, and I had the margin to treat January like a full reset. But as I moved further into my career, and especially after having kids, the model stopped being realistic. Now, winter break looks very different. By the time the break hits, my husband and I usually get sick because that's what happens when you finally slow down. And at the same time, we're suddenly shifting into stay-at-home parent mode for kids who are normally in school all day. That structure changes, the quiet disappears, the extra time everyone assumes you have, it's not really there. And I realized something really important. Trying to rebuild everything in January wasn't just unrealistic, it was unnecessary. What actually helped wasn't starting over. What helped was doing more of what already worked. Over time, I stopped asking myself, what do I want to change next semester? And I started asking, what worked last semester and how can I do more of that? Sometimes the answer was just one thing. One routine that ran smoothly, one lesson structure students understood, one workflow that saved me time, one expectation students actually remembered. And instead of tossing everything else out, I let that one thing become my anchor. This shift was huge, not just professionally, but personally, because January isn't actually a clean slate. In many schools, the semester doesn't even end right away. There's overlap. There's unfinished business. There are only a few class periods before schedules change. There's grading, pacing, and logistics layered on top of exhaustion. So demanding a full system overhaul on top of all of that, it creates more stress. What created calm was clarity, and clarity came from choosing less, not more. So here's what I want to offer you, especially if you're listening to this during break and feeling that low-level pressure to use this time wisely. You do not need a new system. You don't need new routines, new trackers, new workflows, new everything. You just need one clear next step. That might be keeping a routine that already works, refining one that feels heavy, reusing something your students already know, deciding what you're not changing, or choosing one focus area for the new semester. January doesn't need drama to be effective. It needs familiarity. It needs consistency, and it needs fewer decisions. If it feels helpful, and only if it feels helpful, here are a few questions you can think about. And if you are a sticky note person like me, grab one and jot down whatever comes to mind. You don't have to answer all of these, even one is enough. So the first question is, what worked better than you expected last semester? What felt heavier than it needed to be, and why? If you could make one thing easier next semester, what would it be? Where would clarity help you most right now? Grading, routines, or lesson planning? You don't have to have perfect answers. Sometimes clarity comes just from naming what matters. And if nothing comes to mind right now, that's okay too. You can come back to this when you're ready. Now, if you're a multi-prep teacher, January can feel especially complicated because you might have some new classes that are completely starting over with new students and new content, and other classes that are continuing with the same students but shifting into new units. So you're not just resetting one thing, you're resetting multiple things at different stages. And that's exactly where the fresh start, rebuild everything approach doesn't work for us. You don't have the time to rebuild 3 or 4 or 5 different systems. You barely have time to prep for 3 or 4 or 5 different preps. So instead of trying to overhaul everything, pick one thing that would make the biggest difference across all your classes. Maybe it's a grading routine. Maybe it's a warm-up structure. Maybe it's a classroom management reset. Maybe it's just deciding what you're not going to stress about this semester. One clear decision can ripple across everything you're teaching, and that's powerful. If you'd like a little help finding that clear next step without overhauling everything, I have a free resource called New Year, New Preps. It's available as an AI teaching assistant that walks you through the thinking with you. You can have a conversation with it, and it helps you figure out what you want to keep, what to refine, and what your next step actually is. There's also a guide version if you prefer to work through it on your own, but I found that the AI assistant is especially helpful because it adapts to your specific situation. It's like having a thought partner who asks the right questions without adding more to your plate. You don't have to do the whole thing, even one section is enough, and you can come back to it when you're ready. I'll link both the AI assistant and the guide in the show notes. As we wrap up, here's what I want you to take into the rest of your break. You are not behind. You don't need to start over, and January doesn't need to be perfect to be better. A softer start still counts. A clear next step is enough, and refining what works is often more powerful than rebuilding everything. You're allowed to ease into the new semester, and next semester can feel better without asking more from you. Until next week, take care of yourself, protect your rest, and remember, you already have more working for you than you think. If today's episode was helpful to you, it could be for others. So make sure that you share it with colleagues and tag me on Instagram at Kristen Masick, KHRISTENMASSIC. Until next week.